I'm going to go over how to model a very low poly crate and bake all of the high poly detail onto it. My low poly is going to be just a 1 by 1 by 1 cube. I'm going to start off by not doing that, by opening up the multi-cut and going just holding down Control and Shift so I can get 2 subdivisions. I'm going to delete the 5 other sides. With the 2 cross edges, I'm going to bevel them to split them into 2 separate edges, and going to block out the wood beams or planks that I want. I am going for a crate similar to this, just with no inside. So I want to have the 2 separate top, bottom, left and right, and the cross beams. I'm going to select the top and the bottom faces and extrude, and delete those side faces. They're not needed and can cause some issues later on. I do need to bevel this. For starters, it's a high poly, so the poly count doesn't really matter. And if I go to the front view, let's just rotate this around. There we go. Even though I have extrusions here, I can't actually see them, and this is what the bake engine is going to see in Painter. Nothing will actually be there, even though we do have extrusions. That's because they are perfect 90-degree corners. So instead of having that, I'm just going to bevel it, and you can see the more bevel you have, the easier it is to see. So I'm going to have a relatively small bevel and bring my segments up to 2. I do want to extrude these these planks out. However, I don't like having that Z-fighting. I don't know how much of a deal it will be, but instead I'm just going to put in a new edge loop going all the way across, bevel it, and then make it go almost all the way to the top. So now when I extrude out, I won't have that issue, and I'm going to delete the left and the right faces, and then select the planks and bevel them, and again give them segments of 2. Right now this gap between them is a little bit bigger than I would like, so I'm going to select those vertices and scale them down. So it looks a little bit nicer. I think I extruded the side a little bit more than I did the top. So instead of fixing that, it's going to pull the top and the bottom out a little bit more to match. I now want these cross beams. This is going to be a new piece of geometry. I'm going to scale it down quite a bit, and then outwards. And then while holding down J when I rotate, I can snap to 45 degrees. Then I'll delete the back and those sides. Then when you're ready, just bevel it. Then I'm going to rotate it, and holding down J again, I can rotate another 45 degrees. I don't want to have this perfect cross right here. It should be separate pieces of wood. So I'm going to cut it in half with the multi-cut, select that edge loop and bevel it, and bring it down so it is about right on the border of the other board. I can then delete those overlapping faces, and if I hold down W and left click at the same time, I can change my orientation for my move manipulator from world to object. So I can just drag it in a little bit so there's a bit of an overlap instead of a gap. But now it looks like there's 2 separate pieces of wood that are being brought together. I'm going to make my just a basic cube again, and this is my low poly. UVing this is fairly straightforward. I'm just going to cut it up into 6 different squares, and then select all of the UV shells and hit stack similar, and then scale this up. Depending on what you want, you can make it take up the entire 0 to 1 space, which I might as well do because I'm not making anything else. we go. So I'm going to do a mesh combine on my high poly pieces, and I'll just call this create high, and this is create low. I'm going to export them as they are right now. Going to run into some issues in Painter, but that's all right. Going to override those old files and open up Painter. That's better. So I'm going to go to File, New, import my create low, and hit OK. Here it is. I'm going to click on the croissant and load in my high poly. If you have red, that means that the max frontal distance needs to be turned up. It's just being left out of the bake. I'm going to turn that up. And right now I'm just going to leave everything else on defaults and hit bake. And usually a little bit more than that happens. I am going to tile those UVs. I'm just going to select all of them except for this one and move them over and see if that helps at all. Going to re-import my mesh. And there we go. Stacked UVs don't always work great in Painter, and you can see now we do have something, but it does not look good at all. And that's because our crate is three-dimensional and our high poly is pretty much just two-dimensional. So a really easy fix for this is I'm just going to temporarily delete those 5 faces, and my low poly is just going to be this one flat square. Going to export that as my low. Going to re-import my mesh again. You can see it's already looking a little bit better. And I'm going to bake again. You can see now have a really nice clean bake. And if I hit Z a few times to get that cube back, and then again override it, and again re-import my mesh, you can see that it's looking really good on all sides. We now run into a new problem though. So if I want to put on this wood texture, it will apply. However, I don't actually have any polygons here, so I can't use my polygon fill to block out where I want this texture to be. I could manually paint in masks, but with a paintbrush that's not the most ideal. So I'm going to make an ID. So I'm going to use a vertex color, go to Mesh Display, Apply Color, and the Options box. And everything that's going to be the same texture is going to get the same color. So I'll make that blue. I'll make the side ones yellow. And I'm expanding my selection by hitting Shift and period or Shift greater than. That will expand the selection equally in every direction. This cross beam is going to be green. These two are going to be cyan, maybe. And that will be purple. So I'm going to re-export my high. And again, I'm going to re-export my low because I do need to have that flat plane for my bake to work. I'll re-import my mesh. I'm going to get rid of that wood. Oops. And I'm just going to bake out an ID now. I need to make sure my material color is set to vertex for my color source for the ID. And hit bake. And now I have my ID, which will make texturing this much, much easier. So I realize I did this in the wrong order, so I just have to undo all that to get my flat cube back. And now I can go and texture. So I'll put that wood texture up here. It's going in the right direction already, which is really nice. I can change my tiling to 2. Wood grain on this one is going in the incorrect direction, so all I have to do is change my rotation to 90 degrees. Over here, tiling 2 and rotation 45. Tiling 2 and 135 degrees. And then for this background here, I'm going to use the rotten wood planks instead. And we have something that's starting to look pretty good. We do have a bit of a gap right here, which I think is a mistake with my color ID. I just didn't assign any color there. I don't want to go back to Maya to fix it. So there's a few things we can do in Painter. I can select my color selection on the mask, and I can up the tolerance. And in some areas it will fill in a little bit. And what I like to do, if I need more than that, because I just have some faces that are not selected, I'm just going to make a fill layer, get the eyedropper, and just pick some of that wood color. And now, especially from further back, you'll never be able to tell. So kind of cheating, but I don't want to remake that mask. I'm going to make a folder, let's call it wood, so I don't have quite as many layers right here. And it is looking pretty good, however it's still a bit flat. So I'm going to make a new fill layer and call it AO for ambient occlusion. And I'm going to turn off my search filters in my library and type in ambient. I have one of them that is the texture map that I baked out. I'm going to drag that to the base color of my fill layer. And I'm going to turn off everything except for the color. And this is the same as Photoshop if you have ever overlaid ambient occlusion onto a render. I'm going to change my normal blending down to multiply. So we just get a little bit of that nice shadowing that ambient occlusion provides, and it looks a bit more three-dimensional. I'm also going to add some dirt. So that's a new fill layer. I'll call it dirt. I'm going to pick just kind of a dirt color. I'm going to click on roughness and type in grunge for the different grunge options. And this one's called grunge dirt. That's looking okay. Make it a little bit less glossy. Then I'm going to add a black mask to that layer. And then go up to the little magic wand, add generator, then click for generator and select dirt. So now I have some dirt in the corners. And I'm going to have it pretty low. I do want dirt in other areas, but right now I'm just worried about the all the corners right here. With that dirt generator selected, I'm going to go back to the magic wand and add a fill. And then for grayscale, it's already searching for grunge because the last thing I searched for. It's going to add another grunge map. And it is completely overriding the dirt generator, so we can't really see the effects of it at all. But once you have this dirt looking kind of how you want, oops, I'm going to change the normal blending to screen. That will overlay both of them. This is much more dirt than I want, so I'm going to turn it down a little bit, just that opacity. So now I have both of the dirt layers affecting it. Affecting the texture. I'm going to make another layer and call it nails. It's probably my favorite brush in Painter. If you just search for nail, you have your nail brush. It's going to click on it to activate it. Size it to be whatever size you want. It's a little big. and going to put in some nails. And since everything is tiling, it's doing all the sides at the same time. So now we have a pretty nice looking crate, especially since it is just 6 faces. When you get close, obviously it's going to lose the kind of illusion that it is a three-dimensional crate. But from afar, it is pretty nice, and it is very game ready. Obviously the UVs are not super optimized if you're going for a game. Usually a crate would not get the entire 0 to 1 space, but for demonstrations you can get it looking pretty good.